Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, the podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this episode we're playing The Legend of Zagor, book 54 in the long-running fighting fantasy series. This one is credited to Ian Livingstone, but a little bird from the internet tells me it was actually written by Keith Martin. It was illustrated by Martin McKenna, who collaborated with Jim Burns on the cover art, which shows 4 different hero portraits surrounding a picture of a leech-looking creature, who I assume is Zagor, who is staring in absolute fury at a rope bridge. The leech creature really hates that rope bridge, possibly because there's a barbarian and an evil-looking warrior about to have a scrap on the rope bridge, and that's almost certainly contravening numerous health and safety regulations. The image only occupies the bottom half of the cover, with the rest of the background being a neutral blue with the title in gold metal effect letters. It's quite a nice bit of work. The figures all look great, but I think I do prefer the full-scale artwork. Before we begin, a couple of quick announcements. Firstly, the usual assurance that I'm working on my new book, and it'll be going out to patrons as soon as it's ready, hopefully before the end of the year. Secure yourself a copy by going to patreon.com/HJDoom and pledging as little as a single £1 to support this podcast. Patreon support is the reason I'm able to turn down people offering to sponsor me to shill brain pills, which happened to me for the very first time this week. The support of my patrons keeps this podcast brain pill free for everyone. Secondly, in very exciting news, the 2025 Lindenbaum Prize has come around again. This is your chance to win actual money for writing a 100-section adventure game book. If you've never tried writing a game book, this is the perfect opportunity to dip a toe in the waters. I was a judge last year, I'm back again for more this year, and I genuinely enjoyed every single book I played last time, and I'd love to play a load more in 2025. Check out Stuart Lloyd's blog for more information, or just search Lindenbaum Prize. It's a cracking competition, and Lindenbaum is Lindenbaum. That's Lindenbaum. Right, let's take a deeper look at the Legend of Zagor. There's a lot to get through with this book, so I'm going to punt discussion of the unique circumstances governing its creation to the end of the episode so we can get into the action in a fairly timely manner. We're on a quest to deal with Zagor, that pesky warlock of Firetop Mountain who is back for a 3rd time. Recurring villains are awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he's got cooked up for us this time. A big difference from previous fighting fantasy books is that we get to choose one of 4 characters to play. A barbarian, a warrior, a dwarf, and a wizard are all on offer. Each has their own advantages and disadvantages, but in the interests of time, we're going to focus on the character of Anvar the Barbarian, who is the character I'm going to play. Anvar is not an especially heroic name in my book, but I do love a barbarian. I appreciate the simple, straight-ahead approach that they represent. All of the characters have slightly different rules for generating their base stats, reflecting their different strengths, and this creates an immediate point of differentiation for the characters you will roll up. Anvar rolls 1 die and adds 6 for his skill, 2 dice and adds a whopping 18 for his stamina, and 1 die and adds 4 for his luck. Keith Martin has messed about a bit with the rules for luck in this book. As well as testing your luck in the usual way and using luck in combat, you can also spend luck to affect the outcome of other rolls, spending a point of luck to add or subtract 1 from a particular roll. I quite like this because it makes your last few points of luck more useful. Once you get down to 2 or 3 luck, you're very unlikely to succeed in a luck roll, so being able to spend the resource to get other advantages is a neat way of balancing that. It does mess with the purity of the luck system though, and whether that matters is something that we'll see through play. My version of Anvar has a skill of 12, a stamina of 22 and a luck of 7. He's good at the old fighting, this lad, but not especially favoured by the gods in other respects. I'm very pleased that he's actually good with his axe. There's nothing more aggravating than an angry barbarian who's all fingers and thumbs. He also gets 1 magic point, predictably the lowest of any starting character. Magic points are used for casting spells, which only Salazar the Wizard can do, but they're also useful for certain magical items. Anvar also gets a special skill, and his special skill is that he can never be surprised. If we're ever instructed to reduce stamina because we've been surprised, we simply ignore it. On the downside, he can't wear plate mail at all. It's far too confining for him. He gains no attack bonuses from wearing chainmail, and he's a bit rubbish with a crossbow. And this all feels suitably barbaric. The warrior can use all weapons and armour. The dwarf and the wizard both have some restrictions on their gear, and all of the characters get their own special skills. All characters start with 12 provisions, so whatever else happens, we will not go hungry. Anvar also gets 3d6 plus 2 gold, which works out to be 12 in my case, so he's got a bit of scratch in his pocket, which I hope will turn out to be useful. You also get your traditional adventuring kit, the lantern, the leather armour, and a small shield, so you're actually starting with a decent bit of gear in this one. I have to say I like the idea of choosing your character. It creates an immediate source of replayability. Keith Martin has done a good job of trying to load the differentiating factors into the rules portion of the text, meaning that writing with 4 possible characters in mind shouldn't eat too many paragraphs in the main text. The downside of this is that it makes the rules section quite complicated. There is a lot to take in, not least the list of 13 spells available to the wizard, all of which are useful in precisely one very specific situation. It's a good way to avoid the magic system eating up half the book, but the cognitive load it imposes on the player is not trivial. On the first playthrough, you'll likely be referring back and forth from the spells a whole bunch, which breaks up the flow of the gamebook, and that's another reason why I chose a nice, simple barbarian for this recording. I think that's everything that absolutely needs to be said at the outset. Anything else I'll mention as and when it becomes relevant. Let's play Legend of Zagor. Background. It is 5 long and weary years since the armies of the Bone Demon laid waste so much of the beautiful, perilous land of Amarillia. Is this the way to Amarillia, we ask ourselves? The zombies and orcs which infested the plains of the land were foul enough, but the demon's war dragons slew thousands of men, dwarves, elves and centaurs, before the demon itself was finally trapped inside the casket of souls. Victory was had at last, but at what a cost? Zombies and worse still stalk the land, for there are few remaining warriors left to destroy them. The court of the boy king Ian is said to be riven by petty squabbles and scheming advisers. Most folk live behind shuttered windows and bolted doors these days. Hospitality to travellers such as yourself is but a memory now. So we're in a completely different world to Titan and Alanzia for reasons that are not entirely clear, but I may address in the closing remarks. Many days of foot-wearying travel have brought you to Sanctuary, the royal court within the island known as the Cauldron, the furthest island of the Ice Cap Range. You are ushered swiftly into an audience with the king. You are startled by his appearance. Most people still call him Boy King, but Ian has grown almost to full stature now. And while he is still very strong and surely inexperienced in the arts of kingship, his voice is commanding and his manner assured. "Greetings," he says as you kneel before his throne. "Oh, do please stand up. I already have all the grovellers I need here in Sanctuary. I can scarcely do with another one. Come." He rises and leaves the throne room and marches along a narrow corridor to his personal chambers. Somewhat startled by his informality, you follow him. I dislike him intensely already. There's nothing worse than someone who can have you killed being all chummy and informal with you, as if to say, "We're equals." Except you're clearly not. "Look," he says as he strides across to a table, picks up a black cloth embroidered with golden runes, and gently polishes a large chunk of blue-white crystal. The crystal hums slightly, and a ghostly scene appears in the midst of the room. A white-haired old man is sitting in the most cluttered study you have ever seen. Papers, crystal balls, bundles of bat wings, bottles of herbs, and a jumble of other articles are scattered all over the floor and walls. Irritably, the old man looks up at you. It's so nice to get the old man out of the way early doors.
"Eh? What is it?"
he snaps. Gareth, the hero I spoke of is here. Relate once more what you have told me, and perhaps you have learnt even more.
Oh, yes. Well, I suppose you've told him about the demon throne and explained the laws of fractured resonance and...
The king interrupts the ghostly apparition. Time grows short. You can explain much better than I can. The old man's gaze turns upon you. He looks faintly disapproving.
Harumph! Very well, then, listen closely, young whippersnapper. I take it that at least you know about King Crawl and the defeat of the bone demon of the bottomless pit.
You shudder slightly. Everyone knows how the armies of the bone demon were finally confronted, and the bone demon was imprisoned in the casket of souls, in the barren expanse of the plain of peril, where the bottomless pit still smokes and churns to this day. That was some years past, but the scars of that terrible war mark Amarillia still. So...
And you know of the casket of souls?
You nod.
Well, when it were made, magic was woven into it to enable the demon's banishment to the outer planes. Unfortunately, there was a slight flaw in the way the magic was woven. Since that magic allowed a magical creature to be drawn out of your world, it also created a resonance allowing certain magical creatures into your world, the old man says in a schoolmasterish tone as he adjusts the slightly ridiculous lenses perched on his nose. And I'm rather afraid that a definitely magical creature has done just that. Appeared in your world, that is. Out of mine. I can't say we're sorry to see him leave us, but our gain is going to be your loss, unless you can stop him emerging in his full power. Worse still, he is entering your world where the casket of souls was taken after the demon was banished, at Castle Argent.
I guess this is Yaz Tromo, who I don't think I characterised as northern in previous episodes, so once again, continuity, not my strongest forte. The old man pauses for breath.
He is named Zagor, and he is a great wizard, one of the most powerful my world has ever seen. My world is called Titan. I suppose you've heard your scholars mention it, Great Alanzia, with its wicked Port Black Sand, ruled by the wretched Lord Azure and his corrupt cronies. The great civilizations of the old world. The crawling chaos of cool. You have heard of it? Well, I won't ramble on about my home. I'll become sentimental and waste time. Let's get back to Zagor. Twice we have believed him slain, but twice he has resurrected himself. All that was left of his original form is a skeletal arm, but that is enough. When he was drawn into your world, he became fused with the trapped demon, and now a demonic form of Zagor grows, even as I speak. Although I am powerless to prevent its happening from the seclusion of my world, I detected Zagor being drawn into yours, and I was able to send some magic after him, some talismans of gold and daggers of silver. They will be scattered around the lair within which Zagor is now growing. Each of them will weaken him, so when you get there, be sure to collect as many as you can.
You aren't sure you like the way the old man just assumes you're going to march straight into the desolate evil ruins of Castle Argent. It's hundreds of kilometres away across the frozen wastes and the dangerous, monster-infested icy seas. But he goes on talking anyway. Oh, this is a long intro. Perhaps I should have summarised it. Oh well, I'm committed now.
This time Zagor simply has to be destroyed. It's not enough to kill him. You have to make sure his body is burned to nothingness in the heart fires below Castle Argent, where the grand wizards of your world centred the conjuring of the great firewall from the outermost points of Amarillia. Though you'll know all about that, of course.
I thought that was merely a tale told, or a deception, murmurs the king sadly, until Gareth told me about certain changes made at Castle Argent. My own spies were able to verify those details. No, so it's Gareth and not Yaz Tromo. That's a shame. It would have been nice to see Yaz Tromo again, but it does mean that my continuity isn't broken in that specific way, maybe broken in a different way. I've just checked, and Gareth is Yaztromo's first name. So it is Yaztromo after all. If only I'd done some proper research before I started. The old man's eyes look bright now.
Ah, yes, the castle. It's metamorphosing, changing form, drawing Zagor's old magic and servants into it, strengthening him as he grows. Not all of that magic may be dark and evil. You may be able to find help there, certainly, in addition to the items I have placed there. But I'm afraid that one of the mightiest and most dangerous of the demon's war dragons, one which escaped destruction in the final battle 10 years ago, has something to do with the magical change within the castle. It has learnt something of the ways of magic, and it seeks revenge for its defeat by allying with Zagor to wreak havoc on all Amarillia. Perhaps in its madness it thinks of him as the demon it once served, which of course Zagor is, in part.
The ghostly scene begins to fade and tremble. Faint white sparks crackle at the edge of the crystal. The old man's voice rises in surprise and annoyance.
Not yet, I should tell you about that.
The crystal explodes into 1,000 fragments. You and King Irian look down stunned at the smoking remains of the table it stood upon. You do not know where the magic which banished the old wizard back to his world came from, but a feeling of evil and menace hangs in the air around you.
Brave adventurer,
the king beseeches you,
I have no one else to send. My wizards give all they can preserving the firewall which guards all of Amarillia. My loyal knights and a few nobles I can trust have more work than they can perform simply preventing this kingdom from tearing itself apart. I beg you, go to Castle Argent. A ship is readied for you. Destroy the wizard fiend who comes to ravage our land. Return to me after carrying out deeds worthy of the knighthood I shall then grant you.
Oh wow, amazing. I risk my life in exchange for a title. No mention of any monetary reward or lands to go with said title, just the title. Also, I'm a barbarian. Why would I want to become a knight? Knights wear big heavy armour. I don't want to wear big heavy armour. Why would a wizard want to become a knight either? Seems problematic at best. This is the risks you run when you try and write a story that is equally applicable to 4 completely different characters. With the weight of the world's fate resting on your shoulders, or so it feels, you cannot refuse the quest. So, lengthy intro. I would describe it as very meat and potatoes, but nice to get a little reference to Yaztromo and a sincere effort to tie in Zagor with this new setting, which is from one of the puzzle books that Ian Livingstone did called Casket of Souls. Anyway, that's all stuff for the end of the episode. Let's get underway. A ship has been ready to carry you westwards to the coastline of Tower Island, where the forbidding majesty of ruined Castle Argent lies. Do you want to set off immediately, or would you like to spend some gold purchasing equipment? Or would you like to try and get some extra gold, or consult one of the king's sages for advice or help? There is a picture of the ship at anchor on the harbour. Very Martin McKenna. Beautifully rendered, quite kind of gothic and ornate. Yeah, nice piece of work. Not sort of earth-shattering, but yeah, perfectly pleasant. Of these options, though, let's go to one of the king's sages for help. I mean, we've had one old man. Why not try and get another? The sanctuary has its fair share of dubious fortune-tellers and charlatans, but the king's querulous old sage Yondale is said to have the sight. So you make your way to his chambers. When you enter, the ancient-looking wizard sage is in an animated discussion with a merchant who is bearing a small wooden casket. He asks you what you want, and when you ask for his help, he snaps at you. This wretch wants 5 gold pieces for the mere gromnet of Barabangian shimmer lizard tails. It is an outrage. Pay him for me and I'll tell you something of use to you. Sure, why not? You pay the merchant and he hands the casket to the old man. Dumping it carelessly in a bronze dish, the sage turns his attention to you. Heading for Castle Argent, eh? You look startled at his prescience, knowing where you are headed. Perhaps he has the sight indeed. No, actually, the king told me. But in fact, I did have one of my visions about the place only the other day. Now, where did I write it down? He scrambles up a rickety stepladder with an agility unusual in one so old, and drags a thick leather-bound tome covered in dust from one of the topmost shelves. He fumbles with the pages, then, with a shriek of triumph, he recites a verse of riddles to you. The knights can only be destroyed by the lions within the green. The hell-horn champion falls to the chevrons in the white. The war dragon falls to the yellow cloistered stars. The ogre mutant falls to the goblet in the blue. The onyx staff empowers you to use these symbols true. Now, that's it, he says. I've no idea what it means, of course, but it is important. Okay, I'll make a note of this section. So, let's try and raise a bit of extra money while we're here. You have a few hours before your ship sets sail on the next tide. You may be able to acquire some gold by putting your hands to use, helping out with labouring work at the docks, or you could try gambling in a tavern. I'm going to try gambling. You need to be smart and eagle-eyed and used to the wicked ways of card sharps and fixed dice if you're going to make money gambling in the seaboard taverns of Sanctuary. Roll 1 die. Unless you are Anvar, you may add 1 to the number rolled, which is nice. Not that I don't get to add 1, but that my unfamiliarity with the work of civilization has a detrimental impact when it comes to spotting card sharps. That feels appropriate. You can also add 1 to the die roll if you choose to spend a point of luck. So, final total needs to be 4 or higher. If you get a 4, you break even. If you get a 5 or higher, you win 4 gold pieces. Really nice, simple, abstract way of representing gambling. Very much in favour of that. I am going to spend a point of luck, taking my luck down to 6. And I get a 2, add 1 is 3. I lose 2 gold pieces. Well, that's me chastened. Now you have little time left, so you must hurry. Local barbarian taken to the cleaners by local card sharps. Yeah, fair enough, seems realistic. You have spent some hours in a rough and tumble part of town where pickpockets and cutpurses throng the streets and taverns. You must test your luck. If you are lucky, you have managed to keep all your gold. If you are unlucky, you lose half the gold in your purse. Round fractions up, a thief has dipped into your pockets. So my luck currently 6. I get exactly 6. Luck now 5. Let's go and see what's for sale in the market. In the markets and shops of the peaceable town of Sanctuary, you can buy many things, but your most likely purchases could be chainmail, longbow and arrows, crossbow and arrows, potion of stamina, a magic ring, a vial of plague antidote, that could be handy, but I can't afford it, an empty glass bottle, some rope, a flask of herbal liqueur, or a potion of fire resistance. Of those, I like the potion of fire resistance best, and a potion of fire resistance uses up all my remaining 5 gold. And I think it is time to leave Sanctuary by ship. So yeah, nice bit of background. Messing about in port, always a nice time. The glory of Amarillia is a fully armed war galley, and to your amazement the captain is a Barabang centaur. Centaurs are hardly renowned for seamanship, but the magical iron shoes on the centaur's feet allow him to walk on water, as you discover when he literally walks aboard after you. There is a fair northerly wind, Captain Caranus says as he sniffs at the bitterly cold air. We should get to the ends of the ice cap islands without fog to worry about. Only icebergs and whatever monsters of the deep may wait in store, eh? The voyage bears out his optimism. The great vessel skirts the warm stream of zephyrs, and after some days turns southwest past the coast of the frozen lands. But on the margins of the warm sea flows, fogs begin to spring up as you head for Tower Island itself. You just keep your fingers crossed, and hope that no predators of the deep are sensing the great ship above you. Do you want to spend a point of luck to avoid even the chance of such an encounter? So, that's an interesting query. That's a very interesting query, because if I choose not to spend a point of luck, and then it's a luck roll, I might as well spend the point of luck, because it's effectively saying spend a point of luck to pass a luck roll. But if it's just a different type of random roll, then I might be advised to hang on to my ever-diminishing supply of luck, and that's what I'm going to do. So an interesting decision. Shortly after dawn, when you are stretching your legs on the deck, there is a sudden churning of the seas on the starboard side of the vessel. You draw your weapon, But just as you are looking over the side of the ship, the true danger swoops down from the foggy skies above. A great white reptile, many meters long, with ragged-edged horny claws and a great mouth and a spiny barbed tail, is heading straight for you. You are surprised, and the monster's claws knock you down, deduct 3 points from your stamina. Now you must fight for your life. Well, I'm not surprised, and I don't deduct 3 points from my stamina because I'm a barbarian. The fog wyvern has a skill of 10 and a stamina of 16. It's a big, chunky lad or lass. There is a picture of the wyvern exploding out of the fog towards the deck, and the captain with his cutlass out, seemingly scarpering, I would say. Yeah, it's really good, classic bit of work, full of dynamism, full of action, really intimidating. Love it. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the fog wyvern. It reduced me to 20 stamina, so very, very handy fight for me there. If you win, the captain and crew help you to your feet and bring food and healing drafts of a herbal brew. Restore your stamina to its initial level, as other men begin the work of getting the huge reptile's carcass off the deck. My stamina back up to 22. Carinus looks unhappily at the monster. "That's not a natural monster," he says. "I know these wyverns, and that tail's malformed. Look at that crooked jaw and the way the bones of the spine protrude through its back. There is some bad magic at work here." The centaur's eyes harden, and he turns to help his men throw the carcass into the sea. After many days at sea, your vessel is within 5 kilometres of Tower Island. Even from that distance you can see the great towered mass of Castle Argent rising into the leaden skies just beyond the shoreline. The galley can go no further in the shallow bay, so you thank the crew who brought you here and take your belongings into the stout rowing boat being lowered for you. Carinus shakes your hand firmly and says, "We head for the River Geld, and hopefully a greeting from my own people, those few who remain in the land upstream. We will come back for you when the moon is new, hoping for your safe return, and news of a triumph, if you are not waiting. We will come once more when the moon is new over the world. All our hopes ride with you. You leave and row for the shore. You stand on the shoreline of Tower Island. Before you is a long, straight stone road leading up to the gates of Castle Argent itself. But on either side of that road are many ruined buildings razed by orcs and zombies in the war against the Bone Demon. In the shattered ruins, little or nothing of any value or use to you is likely to be left after the destruction here. There may be some remnants of the demon's armies here scrounging what they can. However, if you want to explore the ruins, you may do so. I don't really fancy exploring the ruins. I'm going to go straight to the castle because I've already been recording for a bit over half an hour and I do want to get to the main event. I already know I'm not going to beat this game on a first playthrough. That's just not going to happen. So we might as well just try and take in the most important sights. The stone-built mass of Castle Argent stands before you. Its great iron-shod gates lie at the end of the road, which then angle down into the earth so that anyone going into the castle must first enter by subterranean chambers. Above ground, the walls of the castle are far too high for you to climb. You see that the castle has a central keep with east and west wings, and on the side of the castle furthest from where you are stands the northernmost great tower, rising to a spire among the swooping seagulls. At its highest point is the throne room, where scores of kings have undergone the ritual of the sword before ruling Amarillia from this mighty fortress. Surely you feel that is where the monster Zagor is growing in his evil might. There is no time to lose. You stride forward to the seemingly unguarded citadel. The massive iron gates, their brass plaques now defaced by crude orcish scrawl, are closed. You can use an open spell. I don't have an open spell, so I'm going to have to try and force the door. Test your skill, adding 2 to the number rolled, for the doors are very heavy. Skill 12. I rolled a 6. That's a total of 8, which is well below my skill. Had I rolled over my skill, I'd still open the door, but I'd have sprained something and had to lose 2 stamina, which is fair enough. You don't really want to be going. Can't get into the castle because you're too puny. Sorry. That would be the most humiliating way for the adventure to end. However, I've got to test our luck, with my luck now down to a measly 5. I roll a 4, so it's absolutely fine. Really burning through that luck, though. There is a tripwire trap behind the doors, but fortunately you see it and step safely over. You now stand in the great entrance hall of Castle Argent. Flanking the long walls here are pennants and shields of the provinces of Amarillia, but many have been defaced or broken and flung to the stony floor. Irregularly placed wall torches burn dimly and provide a low light, enough to see by. They also suggest there must be living creatures herein, and this spells danger. There is a door to either side of this entrance, and from behind one of them you can make out the grunts and guttural speech of orcs. They will surely be simple guards with no gold or items of value, so it's pointless wasting your strength on them. You edge forwards as quietly as you can. Before you there is a small door to your left and another one to your right, and a pair of larger doors directly ahead. I love that touch. It gives you that vibe of listening at doors without actually needing to eat multiple paragraphs on do you want to listen at the door, do you want to open the door, and so forth. Just sensible adventuring built into the fabric of the story in a way that feels very natural. I'm going to go for the large doors straight ahead. We're going right down the middle, I've decided. You stand with your back to the doors at the end of the entrance hall looking west. Immediately in front of you is another pair of double doors, while to the north a passageway stretches out for many metres. There are 2 doorways further along on the west side of this northbound passage, and a door at the end of it, and it turns back eastwards far in the distance. To your left the passage soon turns west. Explore an area you have not entered before. That's a nice thing to see. Always good to be able to have a rummage around the entire area. So we'll go through the double doors. I'm enjoying these double doors for some reason. I'm going to keep on until I run out of double doors to go through. You push open the double doors and find yourself at the entrance to a very dimly lit but huge chamber. You raise your lantern to take a closer look. Clearly this is a feast hall, and around the huge dining table are skeletons seated in the rags and remains of what was once finery. While you are taking all this in, a squeaking and turbulent mass of huge black rats rushes down upon you. Do you want to fight or do you want to flee? I'm going to fight the rats. The angry horde of ravening diseased vermin rushes at you. The rat horde has a skill of 7 and a stamina of 8. I will be fine, but if they win an attack round, bad stuff will happen. So wish me luck. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the rats, and of course they managed to do 2 damage to me, meaning that my stamina is reduced to 22, and I've contracted the terrible pestilence bubonic plague. After you've entered 5 rooms, or chambers, or caverns, the plague begins to take hold, and you must deduct 2 points from your initial and current stamina for each new room until you reach 0 and die. So you need to try and find a healer, or I've already got access to a plague antidote, which I would have had if I hadn't gone gambling in Sanctuary. The plague antidote will restore your initial but not your current stamina. So now I'm in a race against time, and not just because of the squeaking. I can hear from holes in the wall suggest that more rats are on the way. Well, they can't give me plague twice, so I'm going to explore the feast hall. Seated round the table are many of King Kral's nobles and courtiers, or their remains to be more accurate. Silent skeletal forms with scraps of ruined robes and doublets form an eerie phalanx in the silent, dark vastness of the hall. In the north wall, some serving hatches reveal a kitchen beyond, which you guess you will be able to enter through the first door along to the north in the passage outside the hall. The silverware here has long been ransacked, but you find a pair of ornately decorated pottery bowls that look valuable, so you take them. The hall is large, and the search takes time, so you must eat a meal. So tuck into some hummus and carrot sticks. Delicious and healthy. Provisions now 11. There is an odd, disturbing atmosphere about the dead here. You feel as if something of their spirits may remain in this troubled place. Do you wish to spend a magic point trying to contact the spirits, or do you want to set out for the kitchens if you have not explored them already? I mean, I've got one magic point. I might as well spend it trying to talk to the dead. The magical energy makes the hall shimmer out of focus for a split second, and then the ghostly form of a young knight stands before you. He is uncertain, but when you assure him as to the nature of your quest, he seems more willing to help you. He tells you that you may find help in the temple due west of here, and that opposite the temple there is another source of healing to be had from a magical fountain, though there is one of far greater power above. He warns you that in the great hall on the next floor above you, the great orc chieftain Thulu holds court over a mutated and undead entourage of fierce orcs and monsters. But he adds that Thulu guards a powerful magic sword. The great hall has black wrought iron doors and is unmistakable. He warns you not to enter the dungeon prison of the castle. There is a very strong golem guard there, though there is also some lost magic of considerable interest to any wizards sealed up there. He also says that you should try and find the crazy old merchant known as Three Eyes Harg because of the eyeglass he always carries, for he may have equipment or magic for sale. Incredibly, the old man has boarded himself up in the castle and has managed to survive all these years. And beware of the wings east and west, the young man adds as his ghostly form fades from sight. Beware, Gruul, keeper of the... Then he is gone. It is time to search elsewhere, for you can hear more rats approaching. Now, a healing fountain sounds like it might be pretty useful. So we're back into a hall. That's 1 for our count of bubonic plague. We'll go down the west passage. You stand at the end of a long passageway looking west. You can see 3 doors along the south wall, and on the northern side there is a passageway leading off northwards between the first and second doors. There is also a door on the north side of the passage, directly opposite to the third and most distant of the south-facing doors. That all went in one ear and straight out the other. At the far end of the western passage, a door faces you as the passage turns northwards. You feel sure this passageway leads deeper into the heart of Castle Argent. Choose an area here which you have not explored. We've got a number of different options. We can head due south, we can open the green door to the east. We can make for the crossroads to the east, we can open the white door to the west. Open the second door to the west, go west and down the south passage, or go west and down the north passage. So let's open the white door to the west. Still trying to find that elusive temple. The white lacquered door opens into a large chamber, which to your delight contains a tower chest. However, from this distance you cannot discern in detail the heraldic symbol on it. The room also contains a pair of suits of armour made of white lacquered plate mail, and grasping halberds in their mailed gauntlets, they snap stiffly and loudly to attention as you enter, pointing their weapons directly at you. Do you want to flee, or would you like to fight them? And if you fight them one at a time. So the first animated armour has a skill of 8 and a stamina of 10. The second animated armour has a skill of 8 and a stamina of 10. So it's effectively one monster with a skill of 8 and 20 stamina. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated both animated suits of armour. I took no damage. If you win, you find that the heraldic symbol on the tower chest shows 3 blue chevrons on a white background. I feel as though I've missed something along the way there. I've either forgotten something, and I did have to go and deal with the cat briefly for about 10 minutes. I am slightly out of my rhythm, but I don't remember being told anything about tower chests. Did Yaztromo tell me something about tower chests? Did the ghost tell me something about tower chests? Oh well, I need to leave either by going east to the midway point of the Passage of Hawks, or west along the south passage, or west along the north passage. Let's go west along the north passage. I know there's a single door to the west as well. I'm going to open that. That's the third room I've been into, keeping track of that bubonic plague. You find yourself in a powder room used by the glitteringly beautiful women of Castle Argent before its fall. Their valuable gilded mirrors, crystal scent bottles and jewellery boxes have been pillaged, and makeup lies in small mounds on the broken and vandalised marble tables. If you are Anvar or Stubble, you leave here. You can make your way along the north passage opposite, if you haven't explored that area before, or you can go back east along the Passage of Hawks. Well, we'll go along the north passage. Braxus and Salazar can find something of interest, potentially. That's exciting. Looking north along this passage, you can see 2 doors opposite each other halfway along the corridor, and one facing you at the far end. A swift check shows that the western door here opens into some bedchambers of the ladies of the court. These rooms have been utterly looted and vandalised. The door opposite them has an onyx-patterned inlay bearing some odd magical runes. The door at the end of the passage has a great shield inlay on it, the design of the old King Kral himself. If you are Salazar, something happens. I am not Salazar, therefore nothing happens. Do you want to open the onyx door or the door bearing the shield? I will open the door bearing the shield. I'm not doing very well at finding this temple. We're on the 4th area for our bubonic plague count. Behind the door with the shield inlay on it is a barracks complex, a network of small parade chambers, dormitories and the like. At the northern end of this network of rooms is a broad east-west passage with 2 doors, one with a lacquered blue coating and the other with a similar coating of yellow lacquer. Do you want to search the barracks thoroughly, open the blue door or open the yellow door, or leave and search elsewhere? Let's open the yellow door. To your delight, the room beyond the yellow door contains a tower chest and a pair of guards, 2 suits of lacquered yellow plate mail carrying heavy pikes in their gauntleted hands. The magically animated suits of armour attack at once. Do you want to choose to flee? They will chase you out of the barracks if you do. If you fight, you can back into a corner and fight them one at a time, and they've got exactly the same stats as the last 2 suits of animated armour. So, yeah, skill 8, stamina 10, the pair of them. I'm going to roll some dice. Once again, I have defeated the animated armour without taking any damage. If you win, the tower chest here has a small shield on its lid showing 8 green stars on a yellow background. When you have opened it, you leave here. Do you want to open the blue door, search the barracks, or leave the barracks and head south? I guess I'll open the blue door. Definitely missed something along the way. Pushing open the door, you find yourself in the royal statuary. Great life-size statues of the kings of Amarillia once lined the grand blue-flecked marble walls here. They are shattered now, possibly by magic, you suspect. Fiery blast markers pepper the walls behind the remains of the statues. However, there is one statue here that remains intact. It is several metres high, and it comes to life with a very threatening gesture as you enter. An expressionless warrior in shape, the enormous statue has a massive spiked stone club in one stony fist, and a long, slender whip in the other. It is clearly a formidable enemy. Behind you can see a wooden chest decorated with a small heraldic symbol of some kind, so it's guarding something which may be valuable. Do you want to fight it? There's a picture of the statue. Real kind of chaos warrior vibe to it. Really, really cool. One I'd love to see turned into a miniature, honestly. Big plate mail, big club, and faces carved into the knee guards and bits of the pauldrons as well. Yeah, it's a cracking bit of work. But I'm going to fight it. I'm tough. I'm hard. Keep doing the barbarian thing and see how far it gets me. That's the plan. The stone colossus swings its club. Each time it hits you, you must roll 1 die. On a 5 or a 6, you lose 3 points of stamina rather than the usual 2. If at any point when you roll dice to determine the attack strength for the colossus, you roll an 11 or 12, something happens. So it's got skill of 8, that's fine, a stamina of 18. There's some big, beefy lads in this adventure. The stone colossus, shouldn't give me a problem, but it is going to have a decent number of goes at getting that 11 or 12. So let's roll some dice and find out what happens. I have defeated the stone colossus. It did not roll an 11 or 12 for its attack strength, which is good. Although I am curious about what actually happens if you find yourself in that position. Nothing good, I'm supposing. Maybe it destroys your sword. That would be a reasonable thing to do. But anyway, I will try and remember to tell you at the end. For now, it'll just be a mystery. My stamina now 18. The colossus collapses at last. Weary with the effort, you drag yourself over to the wooden chest and examine it carefully. The small shield design on its lid shows a pair of yellow goblets on a blue background. Inside the chest you find 3 gold pieces, a magic ring and a scroll with a skill spell written on it. Gain 1 luck point. So skill spell will allow me to increase my effective skill by 1 for either 1 roll or 1 combat. My luck is now back up to 5. I've got 3 gold and I've got a magic ring. Okay, tower chests I've looked up and I've finally remembered where it was. It's in the intro. There is a section on special treasures, and they're small wooden caskets with a trap placed on them. You can choose to open them, but if you want to open them, you will test your luck, and a failure will trigger a scything blade inside the lid, which will slash your arms, dealing 3 stamina. Once you've opened it, you roll a die. And on an odd number, you find a golden talisman. If you roll an even number, you find a silver dagger. And you increase your luck by 1 each time you take a talisman or dagger from a tower chest. The luck roll fundamentally doesn't matter. So I found 2 chests, which I could have opened, but I obviously decided not to on those occasions. Yeah, I do remember reading that in the rules now, but so many rules to keep track of. So anyway, with that now properly identified, we will leave the barracks and explore elsewhere. And we went through another room, so I think we're on 5 now. So for the next room, we are going to start losing hit points. Leaving the barracks behind, you head southwards along the passageway. To your left is an onyx inlaid door. Do you want to open it? Yeah, why not? Now we lose 2 as the bubonic plague begins to take hold, reducing the stamina to 16. The first thing you notice in this chamber is the set of interlocking circles drawn on the floor. Next, the many blue and yellow wall hangings and a pair of huge gilded copper urns set in the corners of its east wall. To the north there is a doorway, just round the corner from you. The air here is heady, with a strange musky perfume. Within the central circle of the magical set, something is beginning to materialise in the air as a faint shimmering. It glows stronger, denser, higher as you watch it, forming into a whirlwind-like vortex several metres tall. Do you want to flee? I do, yes, this seems bad for barbarians. I'm going to leg it. Standing in the middle of this passageway, you should open a door you haven't tried before, or alternatively you should return south and east to the midpoint of the Passage of Hawks. So, we've opened the onyx rune door, we've opened the door with the shield inlay, and we've opened the door to the south. So actually we are done in this area. So we're back off south, then east along the Passage of Hawks. You are standing midway along the Passage of Hawks. Looking south you can see the door by which you entered this level of the castle. To the east there is a green door in the south wall, then a crossroads, then the passage continues east without any further doors leading from it. To the west there is a white door on the south wall, then a corridor leading south, and finally, some metres before the end of the passage, there is a door in the south wall directly opposite a southwards leading passage. So, you should head for an area you haven't explored before. I don't think I've opened the green door to the east, so that is what I will do. Really, really need to map this book. Don't do this book without mapping. That is a plan. So we lose 2 stamina for entering a new room, down to 14. The green lacquered door opens very readily, and the chamber beyond appears strange, for it is filled with dead vegetation. You can see a wooden chest half buried under trailing vines in the distance, so you enter in order to take a closer look. As you do so, a huge shape arises from the half-rotten plant remains, roughly human-shaped. This thing is composed of vines, and it reaches out for you, its knobbled limbs trailing twitching vines along the ground. There's a picture of the vine golem, or the plant golem. Yeah, very sort of swamp thing. Very, very cool, actually. There's vines and bits of mulch all over the place. It looks exactly like you might imagine it to look. This vaguely humanoid shape made of roots and decaying matter, but it's beautifully realised. It's a really, really good piece of work. I'm going to fight it, and there's a special rule. Each time it wins an attack round, you must test your skill, and if it fails, it has wrapped some of its trailing vines around your legs and arms, making it harder for you to move freely and fight it. Fortunately, I got a skill of 12, so that never applies. So it's actually just a straight fight with a skill 8, stamina 13 monster. I'm going to roll some dice. I I have defeated the plant golem, and it hit me twice, reducing my stamina to 10. What with the bubonic plague really kicking in now, I'm going to drink some Lucasade from my provisions. Nothing better for you when you're under the weather than Lucasade. And I will reduce my provisions to 10, increase my stamina back to 14. If you win, to your dismay, you find as you open it that the chest here is not a tower chest, but it has a heraldic device painted inside its lid. This shows 7 red lions on a green background. Inside the chest you find 4 gold pieces and a potion of stamina. Drinking this restores stamina equal to half its initial total. So that's good, that's very helpful. And you can drink it at any time except during combat. So 4 gold pieces as well makes 7 gold in total. Now, leaving this room and entering the Passage of Hawks, will you head west or east at the crossroads? So we'll go east, and we're standing back midway along the Passage of Hawks. Done the green door. Have we done the white door? Yep, we've done the white door. Second door to the west. We done that? Yep, we have. So I guess we head due south. You are standing at a junction of passages. One runs east and west, to your right and left respectively. Another, leading northwards, is straight in front of you. You are looking towards the north with the door to the entrance chamber at your back. The corridor in front of you runs for some 15 metres, then it meets a very extensive east-west passageway, the walls of which bear plaques showing the etched figures of hunting birds. This is the Passage of Hawks. To your right there are 2 doors on the south side of the passage, which then turns to the north. At this point there is a door facing westwards. To your left there is a single door, again on the south side of the corridor, which turns northwards. This is such amazing content to read out loud. All of the passages here are lit by dim torches. They give out a faint magical light, which grows weaker with the passing years, but which is sufficient for you to see by. I am completely lost. We're going to open like a couple more doors maybe, because the rooms are at least a bit more interesting than the corridors. So, but yeah, we'll open the first door to the left. Test your skill upon opening the door, and I am successful because my skill is 12. I lose 2 points of stamina down to 12. You have been fortunate enough to come upon 2 orc guards sleeping in dereliction of their duty. You dispatch them swiftly, gain 1 luck point. Luck now 6. Their armour and weapons are of little use to you, but you gather some food from this guard room. Do I want to eat orc food? Probably not, but beggars can't be choosers, and with my stamina constantly draining, I need all the tuck I can get. So 12 provisions now. Leaving this room, you can head back east to explore, or go west to the north turning of the passage. So we'll go back to where we were, and we will try the first door to the right. And we will reduce our stamina to 10. Might as well drink my potion of stamina at this point to get the whopping 11 stamina back. So that takes us back up to 21. That's helpful. The office of the one-time Castellan of Castle Argent has been looted, of course, but there are still some aged brittle papers and ledgers scattered among the shambles. You find a small scrap of paper headed Inventory of Magical Items, held by the paper is torn. There is just one item listed as an orc-slaying dancing sword, with a brief note that the sword is temperamental and makes awkward demands. Currently owned by Sir Bet is the final note. Clearly, such a sword would be very valuable to you, if only you knew the knight's full name and where the sword might be found. That would be helpful, except for the fact, and I was mentioning this on Blue Sky just the other day, that I have a real and abiding loathing for talking swords and talking weapons of any kind. The only talking weapons I'm remotely happy with are the ones from the 2000 AD comic Rogue Trooper. I don't know why, it's not rational, but I find talking weaponry incredibly aggravating. And on that bombshell, I'm going to call a halt to the recording there. I think there's several things evident from the recording already. One is that reading out descriptions of corridors is tremendously poor podcasting material, for which I apologise. The second is I do actually need to make a map. I really do actually need to make a map, and that already makes me quite irritated by this book. But I'm not going to go and play from here on because I don't think anything's going to be gained by it. I'm actually going to call this adventure over and I'm going to start again with a new character and see how far I get. And this time I'm actually going to try mapping the place. So look forward to me moaning like a spoiled child about the imposition of having to occasionally make marks on bits of paper in my closing remarks, which are coming for you in just a couple of seconds. Tatty bye. Clever listeners may have noticed that I failed to deduct 2 points from my initial stamina as well as my current stamina for the deadly bubonic plague that I was carrying. That's one deadly plague, which honestly is reasonable enough. I definitely would have failed to beat the game book with my stamina draining at speed, so I think we can assume Anva succumbed to the disease, which is a sad end indeed. It's a neat mechanic though, messing with initial stamina to that level is not at all common. Even more astute listeners may have detected that I somehow contrived to skip more or less the entire first floor of the castle. Working back, I've come to the conclusion that I managed this astonishing feat by misparsing a 3 as a 5. Usually that's the sort of thing that becomes obvious rapidly, but in this case both sections were descriptions of very similar corridors, meaning that I didn't catch the error until I was replaying the book and trying to work out how I'd missed so much on my first playthrough. It's no wonder I was struggling to find the temple. I was looking for it on entirely the wrong floor. I think this might be the most cursed recording I've ever released, so yay me. It's nice that 100 episodes in I can still find new ways to screw up. It's a bit of a shame, as I think some of the strongest thematic material in the book is actually on the ground floor of the castle, and it would have been nice to showcase that on the recording. While we're on the subject of things in the playthrough, I mentioned that I'd let you know what the special rule for the fight with the statue that has a club and a whip was. If it rolls an 11 or 12 for its attack strength, it hits you with the magic whip, which turns you to stone if you don't have a spare magic point to shrug it off. Since I was down to 0 magic points, that would have been instantly fatal, so I definitely dodged a bullet there. It's abundantly clear that I was finding this one a little bit like hard work. Part of that is down to the cognitive load, which is fairly high for a game book, and I would argue too high for a really smooth experience. You already saw me forget about the castle chests, which have their own system explained in the rules. There's quite a lot of other things to mentally track as well, not least parsing the layout of the castle from the descriptions. It is a systems-heavy book, and having 4 characters with their own little wrinkles just makes it even harder to mentally hold everything in your head. Can your character use that weapon that you've picked up? You may well have to go back and check. It's a personal taste thing to an extent, and it's doubtless coloured by my habit of reading things out loud on the internet, but I do find that the game books I appreciate the most are the ones that let me read them without constantly requiring me to draw maps or check rules or write endless things down. It's always tempting to externalise elements of the design to avoid making the structure of the book too complex, but if you do this too much, you end up stopping the player from being able to simply read, and that can harm the sense of narrative that is one of the strongest features of the format for me. Usually I need to record about an hour and 15 minutes of audio to get the hour of content that feels about right to me for the intro and the recorded playthrough. On this occasion, I ended up with an hour and a half of raw audio that edited down to less than an hour because I was constantly checking my notes to look things up. As a recording experience, it felt very stop-start, which doesn't generally lead to my finest work on the mic. Overall, I found Legend of Zagor quite gruelling. Even once you've internalised the core rules, there's just a lot of admin to be done, something that isn't helped by the increasingly recondite ways the book tries to prevent cheating. As well as writing down the various bits of loot you'll find in the dungeon, there's a bunch of stuff that the book doesn't tell you should write down, which you should definitely write down. There's various points at which you'll need to turn people's names into numbers and add them together to turn to a hidden paragraph, and there's also some features of the dungeon that get used in this way. So you're almost writing a diary of all the things you did on your holidays. And it means I ended up constantly second-guessing what was going to turn out to be relevant, and that meant adding more notes on top of making a map and writing down all the things the book specifically instructed me to write down. Legend of Zagor already feels quite long. The castle has 3 floors, and given that you can explore them all very thoroughly, you'll probably see quite a big portion of the book even on an unsuccessful playthrough. The additional admin slowed my progress through the book to an absolute crawl. At times I felt like I was walking round an art gallery, making sure that I read all the little notices next to the old masters, putting them in their historical context. And by the end, I felt exhausted rather than exhilarated by the experience of beating the book. Being too long and too complicated are fairly minor complaints in some ways, but it's the behaviour that these elements shape that's the real problem, and that is honestly my biggest complaint about the book. Although you'll want a map, you can technically explore without one if you're willing to be extremely systematic about it. I should mention that there are some very helpful maps on the Fighting Fantasy fan site, which I turned to on several occasions when I'd clearly messed up my own efforts. Did I mention that I'm terrible at mapping? I'm terrible at mapping. Fortunately, you can go everywhere in the book without too much difficulty, and once I grasped that it was just a series of hubs, I found it much easier to trawl through, and trawl is very much the right word. It's just a pity that the hubs are all a series of corridors with some doors leading off them. They don't feel very memorable, and it means that the best strategy is just to work your way through the various options in the order that they are presented so that you don't miss anything. It rewards a very unimaginative play style, and that's something I think can be an issue with an open design. It can turn the adventure into a process of elimination where you're kind of just working your way down a checklist. And that is efficient, but it doesn't feel like being caught up in the midst of an exciting adventure. Giving the player freedom is good, but sometimes it comes at the cost of narrative. I think this is because if you can go everywhere on a single playthrough, then it actually reduces the impact of making choices, the very thing game books are built upon. There's something of a paradox here which I find fascinating. In theory, being able to make more choices should create more player freedom, which should create a greater sense that you are moving through a real world. But actually, I think the opposite thing happens. It ends up draining the excitement from a lot of the choices because you're aware that you'll be able to go back and make different choices. And those choices that you have made can become meaningless. A game of poker is exciting because once you've thrown money in the pot, you can't get it back unless you win the hand. And that degree of variance is thrilling. Playing a game of chess will always be more exciting than solving a chess puzzle, because the puzzle will never surprise you. In a game book, you are the hero, and you are the source of much of that variance. And when you let players explore the whole map in a meticulous and not particularly intuitive fashion, it takes away some of that variance and thus some of the excitement. Ultimately, everyone is going to be playing it in much the same way. It also leads to some extremely bland descriptions of corridors and doors. Both Vault of the Vampire and Island of the Undead by Keith Martin do a much better job of marrying a certain freedom of movement with a sense of narrative urgency. And I think there is actually a wonderful middle ground where you do give people that option to explore an area in whatever way they feel appropriate, but that you also create more linear experiences within that freedom that require them to make difficult decisions that they won't be able to take back. It's something I tried to do in my last game book, Primetime Dungeons, which has some classic dungeon elements, but I hope a degree of flow through the areas. The framing device deliberately made backtracking impossible in order to keep things moving forward on any given playthrough. It's part of why Death Trap Dungeon is so good. It's a series of dungeon encounters, but structured so as to give a subtle narrative thrust, and there's always a sense of forward momentum and the feeling that the decisions you've made in the past are set in stone. Legend of Zagor doesn't flow. It feels more like a board game, and it turns out there's a good reason for that. It is essentially an adaptation of a board game. Actually, if we're splitting hairs, that's not quite true. It's an adaptation of a board game, which is itself an adaptation of Book 2 of a series of 4 novels that grew out of a puzzle book called Casket of Souls, and tied the background and the setting of that book into the Fighting Fantasy universe. So the game book Legend of Zagor is the game book of the board game of the book, which is a sequel to the book, which is a sequel to the book. The Legend of Zagor is a relatively straightforward dungeon crawl board game with some nice little miniatures and a computerized element which has Zagor himself talk to you at various points as you're working your way through the 3 boards that form the meat of the dungeon, telling you how different encounters pan out and so forth. It's quite clever, And if you're interested, there is a really thorough review on the YouTube channel Always Bored, Never Boring. And it's a game that looks kind of fun, but not something I want to spend north of £100 on. Not least because talking board games sound like a tremendous plan, until you realise it's like being trapped in the kitchen at a party with someone who insists on telling you about the car they've just bought in excruciating detail, while you watch them making bottle after bottle of Newcastle Brown Ale, and kind of secretly hope they're planning to drive home along an unfrequented but treacherous mountain road. I think with any talking board game you will develop a loathing for the bit of it that talks to you sooner or later. What you don't get in a solo dungeon experience like this is the social aspect of a board game or a role-playing game, and those social aspects go a long way to making dungeon crawls fun for me. My husband and I play quite a bit of the Dark Souls board game and the Warhammer Quest Cursed City game, both of which are great fun for 2 players, but probably less so for 1. Add to that the limitations of gamebook combat, and it's very easy to end up with something that accurately simulates the least interesting aspects of playing a dungeon crawl, but struggles to capture the things that make dungeon crawls fun. On a personal note, my dyslexia means that I can't even have beer and pretzels with a gamebook to get closer to that light-hearted board game feel, because any amount of alcohol makes it extremely difficult for me to read. But I do get the impression that the Legend of Zagor board game would be pretty good fun if you got some friends around, got some beer and pretzels, and, took it about as seriously as it deserves. The effort to try and represent as much of the board game as possible in the book creates some mechanical issues that mar the experience further. The magic system is badly underbaked and makes playing Salazar a deeply masochistic choice. The spells are simply not impactful enough, often enough, to justify their cost in magic points, and the need to create spells which can operate outside the section descriptions, for the most part, keeps them from being properly integrated into the story. The exception to that is the open spell, which is also the spell that's most frequently referenced in the actual text. That fairly dull spell is one of the only ones that ends up feeling actually important because it's the one the text references, and therefore has been built into the fabric of the adventure. Magic systems are hard in game books in general, but I think it's a situation where borrowing from role-playing games is something of a mistake. Rather than spell lists and magic points, I think the best way of doing magic in a gamebook is simply to treat spells like skills or items. It's something I might try and explore in a future book. If you just ask, do you know this spell? That to me is more interesting than trying to create spells that parasitically operate outside of the text, because this way they are built into the very fabric of the story, and I think that's important. In particular, I think that trying to do a full magic system in a book that also needs to be balanced for characters with very little magic is a nightmare, and probably the biggest reason that magic feels so underpowered. I'm genuinely not sure why the author decided to try and create a book for 4 characters, other than the board game had 4 characters, but I don't think it really works. Even though it's incredibly short, the Hero Quest game book, that one we covered a while ago by Dave Morris, does a better job of trying to somehow give you a sense of leading a party of 4 adventurers. Here, I don't think it really works. Aside from the wizard, you've got 3 different flavours of fighter, and although they each get a few nice little moments to differentiate them, none of them have a particularly distinctive playstyle, so I'm left wondering what the point of it all was. Trying to write for 4 different perspectives at once cuts you off from a lot of literary techniques. Everything has to be written so that it makes just as much sense for a dwarf, a knight, a barbarian, or a wizard, and the appeal of playing these 4 different characters, to me, is the very different perspective that they have on the world and the very different perspective they have on adventuring. I think it would have been more interesting to read if the author had just picked 1 character to focus on. I'd love to see a proper barbarian represented in game books. It's not something you actually see very often. Some of this speaks to personal taste. I'm definitely someone who considers the book side of a game book to be as important as the game side. I think if you lean more towards the game side of things, and you've got a good memory, and you like mapping, which I know some people do, you'll have a better time with this than I did. I don't think this is a review that should put you off playing it. If it sounds appealing to you, you will probably enjoy it. And from a formal design perspective, I have to admit that I'm impressed by just how much design Keith Martin has managed to cram into 400 sections. It's rammed to the gills with design. It's overflowing with design, literally, because so much of it has had to be taken out of the body of the text and crammed into a rules section. And by no means all of it is bad. There's some wonderful encounters, and although there's a lot of meat and potatoes combat, there's also a whole bunch that mess with the rules in interesting ways to spice things up, especially towards the end when there's a whole slew of fights that feel epic, leading up to a tremendously complicated showdown with Zagor himself. I particularly like the ogre Gruul, who will turn a massive ballista on you if the fight seems to be going badly, and also the Chaos Champion, who's got great art and also a little table of different ways he can try and mess you up, which I particularly enjoyed. There's also the messing about with the luck system, which is sort of successful, but probably needs more work to make it really sing. I like the idea of being able to spend luck points on top of making luck rolls, but it's something that needs to be carefully judged if it isn't going to take away from the purity of the luck system. I'm a big fan of the luck roll in concept, but the application of it can be a little rough. Keith Martin here hints at some interesting design space, but there's always the question of why a roll you can spend luck on isn't just a luck roll. More work needed, but some intriguing thoughts nonetheless. I also very much appreciated the characters you get to meet along the way. This is probably the highlight of the book for me. Castle Argent has a whole cast of supporting characters. There's the last surviving knight cowering in one corner of the castle, and a group of thieves who have broken in searching for treasure and got much more than they bargained for. There's a dark elf lurking in a safe spot who you can mistake for a different character, something that makes him extremely angry. They aren't quite as good as the NPCs in Vault of the Vampire, who are tremendous, but they still provide some really good colour, which I appreciated and help make the castle come more alive. Keith Martin has done a good job of trying to suggest a history for the space, and show that this is a space once devoted to good that has been broken and debased by evil rather than a place that evil has made for itself, and I like that a lot. While I'm on the subject of things I liked, I also enjoy that there's a preamble to the adventure. There's nothing very novel happening here. You get a chance to buy stuff or gamble or do a bit of work in Sanctuary, all things we've seen many times before, but it does a really good job of giving the adventure a little context, and I like that. I'm also a big fan of the art. Martin McKenna was a prodigious talent, and with his fighting fantasy work coming early in his career, I feel like we're watching him get better with every book he's worked on. His work here shows off his knack for naturalistic-looking humans, and also his ability to make really unpleasant-looking monsters. He is one of the best illustrators on the series, and I think this book might be his best work so far. Overall, I think this book is trying to do far too much, but the fact that it works at all is something of a miracle. If you want something that feels like a board game, and you're happy playing it very slowly, there's actually plenty of fun on offer here. If you prefer something that feels more like a swashbuckling adventure, this one is likely to test your patience. It certainly did mine. Looking online, I can see that the reaction to this book is definitely mixed. Some people enjoy the design and others find it unfathomably tedious and really very difficult, which to be fair it is. I think I've shaken out somewhere in the middle. I can appreciate the formal skill that's gone into the design, but I think the adventure got lost somewhere in the shuffle. That is all for this episode. Join me again in a couple of weeks for another bonus episode. In the meantime, if you want to get in contact with me, you can email me at hjdoomretrofun, all one word, @gmail.com, or you can follow me on Blue Sky at hjdoom. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.